Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Vanessa, Chantel, Reeve. Hey, Reeve, I was talking to you yesterday.
How's it going again?
How's it going? Please feel free to turn on your video. I think we're going to have a relatively small group, so this is meant to be kind of just a discussion and a chance to listen to our speaker today, but free flowing, and you can ask your questions either in the chat or raise your hand and jump in while we're talking. So it'd be nice to see everybody's face. Of course, no pressure, but I'm gonna go ahead and ask. Hi, Breezy Webster. I love that name. How's it going? Ken, Chantel. Chantel, hello, good afternoon. Heather, hello. All right, I think we're just going to go ahead and get started. We're together, I think, for about an hour and a half, depending on how the conversation goes. Welcome, welcome. My name is Selena Dorme. I am the Manager of Engagement Capacity with the First Nations Public Service Secretariat. I'm also a member of the Tsimshian Nation here in North Vancouver, but I'd also like to recognize the neighboring nations that also share the unceded territory, which is the Musqueam and Squamish too as well. This is called what we call a fireside chat. And again, it's meant to be in kind of a little bit of an informal discussion webinar where we feature a variety of different speakers to talk about their experiences and open it up to the group to ask any questions for the speaker based on their experiences that they've shared. It's really a place for sharing amongst other First Nations. Of course, the sharing can happen between the participants too as well. It doesn't just have to be all targeted here at Joe, who we have today. So I will be monitoring the chat, and Michelle, my friend and colleague, will be helping if you have any tech issues or anything like that, but please feel free. I think everybody knows how to use Zoom by now. You can raise your hand or put your comments in the chat. I would now like to introduce former Chief of Kitselas First Nation, Joe Bevan, who is our speaker today, and I'll let him continue and introduce himself a little bit more. But thank you so much for your time, and I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Hi, Heather. Hey, Ken. I know those two. Good to see you guys. Yeah, hello. My name is Joe Bevan, Nisga'a Tsimshian from the northwest coast of BC. Before we get started, I'd like to do a land acknowledgement. I'm on the Tsleil-Waututh First Nation, or Tsleil-Waututh Nation's traditional territory. They're unceded, stolen lands, and I'd like to acknowledge that I live here, and I thank them for allowing me to do my business every day on their territory, and for that I'm forever grateful. So thank you. Where to start? Well, I'll let you know who I am first, and then I will go through one major challenge that happened during while I was chief as a leader, and then kind of what I recognized from all of those changes. And then I've seen a host of questions that were asked from some of the groups, so maybe we go through some of that. Or if you guys have any questions, please stop me at any time. I'd love to. I think we learn a lot more when we have more interaction with one another. So yeah, please stop me at any time. If you find something interesting, put your hand up, or just take off mute and say, hey, Joe, stop me right there, and I have a question. So this is very informal, and even though I've created formal notes, you don't have to be formal. So I will. So my mother is Nisga'a, my father is Tsimshian, and I grew up on my father's reserve in Kitselas, just outside of Terrace. It was a resource-based economy, and there was really heavy reliance on fishing, logging, and processing. My background and experience is in accounting, finance, management, economic development, and governance. I worked in a few institutions and businesses in Vancouver before I moved home and managed the finances for Kitselas First Nation. I did a 5-year term with Kitselas, got them out of remedial action with ISK, or it was INAC then, and got them financially stable. Received an opportunity to be a controller for a logging company named Kyah Ventures. Still in existence today, still operating, yes. And it was a great opportunity to do a startup. And so I got to develop all the processes and policies and got to know the business on all aspects of logging that I never thought I'd ever get into. And while working for Calum, I sat as a counselor. After about 3 years, I sat as a counselor for 6 years before running for chief. After 9 years, I left the logging company, and then I moved on to Kitselas as a full-time treaty and industry negotiator. And it was back then that we had the LNG was just ramping up in the Northwest. It was during those negotiations that I realized both treaty and LNG were going to change my nation and the region indefinitely, right? As a treaty nation, it would require Kitselas to become a government based on laws and policies. And our industry was about to change from fishing and forestry to servicing the gas and oil industry. We started to develop a plan, on how we were going to contend with all of these changes. First, by running the administration with policies and laws using programs that were already available. So with the financial management boards, financial administration law, which gave us some taxation. We started using the land code for making decisions. And we developed policy in other areas that weren't covered, such as social housing. We tightened up on our land stewardship. We developed a protocol for engaging with industry. And I knew it would take a long time to implement. So we started with the governance piece right away, right? Because governance takes a while to implement as well. The second part of the plan was to prepare the community for the major industry that was about to hit our territory. Most of our members didn't know, what was coming and why it was happening. All they knew was pipelines kill fish, right? So we started in with an educational series of workshops that were led by Indigenous professionals to explain, what was going to happen and what, and how we were going to contend with industry. And then the third item, we thought, well, let's do it very strategically. And so we put together a strategic plan to help us achieve our goals and to move our nation forward, and how we were going to engage. And this is where we had changed. We wanted to be more of an organization that we only had one employee. The chief and council had one employee, and that was going to be the CAO, and then everything ran through that person. But that was a major change from where we were before, right? So there was a lot of change going on during that time. The major change to all this was how we were going to meet the changes that were going to happen. What were the members going to receive from all these changes? These were the questions we were asking ourselves. Would they agree or disagree with the approach of the changes? So we asked, so as we started running, going through these three different areas, we went, how many of you have tried to implement a plan through your organization and it fell flat, right? Why do you think it fell flat? I mean, it was a good plan. Everyone liked it, right? So our changes fell flat as members pushed back and didn't want the treaty changes, right? But they did want the economic change, because they saw the fishing and the forestry were kind of dying off, and they were kind of a shell of what they used to be. And we were kind of like, why was that so difficult? Why here? And so here's why we thought it was difficult. We have 3 different interest groups with 3 different perspectives that have to come together in order to help facilitate the change, right? So the management of, let's say, Kitselas organization, it's a system that was developed to achieve, a defined goal, right? That's how administration thinks. The parts must all fit well together to meet the demands of the environment, and the action comes through good planning, right? So the organization is basically a machine and operates like that. That's how we think about it. Political, of course, the organization is a social system that is diverse, has interests and goals, and those are sometimes contradictory to political aspirations, right? Competition for resources is expected, and the action comes through power, right? Organizations are contests, right? Each one of us are all competing, right, as counselors to define our goals for our constituents, right? So it gets really competitive. And as for membership, well, the organization is a system, developed by both meaning values and routines, informal norms, traditions that exert strong influences on our behavior, right? And the action comes through habit, right? So organizations are institutions, right? And they will just continue to keep operating as we will it to, right? Those perspectives weren't taken into consideration when we were developing that roadmap forward, right? And when we engaged with community members in regards to the economic development piece, they felt more engaged, and that they accepted, they were more accepting of opinions, right, on where this was going. And they thought, oh, this is great. This is, and you guys are engaging with us and talking to us and telling us, and before you sign off on any deals, you're bringing them forward. So they thought it was very interesting. The other piece was, was the policy and the laws approach, and the members and the staff were not engaged with the development of laws and policies. So they didn't see themselves in this new approach, and they didn't support it. So what ended up happening is we had to kind of shelf it, because we had to stop it, because we were creating laws and policies on everything. Basically what I wanted, what my vision was, I thought, well, if we're going to be a treaty nation, then we need to act like one. Well, that's going to take some time. So, okay, if treaty's 10 years away, then why don't we start doing that right now? Why don't we start developing those financial policies, and let's start operating by decision making, such as that. Very bureaucratic, right? Very government way of running things. And yeah, we got pushback. The people weren't happy. They were not. We ended up having to shelve some things and kind of put some things on hold, just because it wasn't jiving with the people. They didn't like it. And you kind of, when we think about change and how things we want to change, if we think about the hierarchy of an administrative office, it's not set up for that to handle change effectively, because the structure only commits to policy and process and how the goals are achieved, and it doesn't allow for flexibility, right? If we think about it, it's that top-down approach, right? Chief and council is the leadership, and the management, they will all make the decisions. Well, so the folks in the bottom, they really can't make that decision or make decisions for themselves to help implement that strategy. How are you going to do that when you can't be flexible, right? It's like, hey, let me go ask my wife if I could do this, right? That makes it really tough on people when they're making decisions, and they want to implement a strategy. So implementation, takes, really, it takes a real informal structure to make it work properly, right? And that's what we were realizing, was that, okay, yeah, we need to have that informal structure. And that was one thing we didn't contend with, was that change management piece. So implementation of change, really takes a team approach, that unofficial team, where there's no reporting structure, no formal reporting structure. But the outcomes, need to happen, because you need to think fast on your feet, and you have to really, get, when you start in with change, you really need to get it rolling fast, right? And get those really quick wins, and let people see that, okay, this change isn't so bad, right? And that's something that would be, more beneficial to, let's get going and let's see the wins right away. But it was rolling slowly. It was like a slow moving car accident, right? And it was just like, yeah, everybody's going, yeah, I could see where this is going. And it means that, we've lost control, because now the administration is more in control of our lives now. So yeah, that caused a lot of problems. And so, two things we had taken away from that was, okay, one, we didn't include the people in when we did the administrative part of it, because we thought, well, this is administration, nobody's going to be interested, right? I mean, the first sign was that, we had meetings on formal structures and formal policies. Of course, when we talked, hey, let's go to the finance policy, 5 people showed up, and it was no interest whatsoever. Of course, policies, finance policies are, and the FAL, for instance, the financial administration law, pretty dry stuff, right? And I wouldn't blame them. I wouldn't have gone either. Just give me the Coles Notes version, And I think we'd probably, probably move that a little better. We would probably be a bit more palatable, if we don't overwhelm them with every little detail. So yeah, so that was our lesson learned, was that, okay, we did really good engagement when it came to LNG, and we did really good education series, but we didn't do such a good job when it came to all the policy work and all the laws that we were creating. So, because nobody really, it's still, I'm not too sure if still today, if anybody really understands the land code or the financial administration law, right? And that was like 12 years, this is 12 years later. So yeah, we really need to take a step back and go, okay, how could we have done this better, right? And what is that change management piece? How would have we done this? And so those were the two lessons that we learned from that. And it was a great experience to kind of be the catalyst of that, to know that, okay, great, you've signed some deals to move your nation forward. That's excellent, and that's going to bring a lot of funding to your organization. So how are you going to deal with that change? And that was the change that we were really preparing for. As for the treaty, we weren't really sure whether that treaty was going to happen or not, because really it was going to be the people's decision, right? They were going to have to vote on that. And if we did our work well enough, well, it would go through. If not, then it wouldn't go through. At first, I was a major proponent of treaty, until I realized later on, during negotiations, that we haven't really talked about the big elephant in the room. How are we going to pay for this all? How are we going to pay for this all? Right now, government pays for everything that we do. How are we going to pay for this on our own? Well, wow, even you get to collect land taxes. Well, great. At a mill rate of 3%, I'm going to have to bring in billions of dollars of revenue in order to, tax that, and to try to pay for, let's say $15 to $20 million in policy or programs and services to my people. And then not only that, now I'm having to contend with land management, right, in a bigger way. So how are we going to do all this without funding, right? And that's still a piece that that we had pushed to change, because we just said, well, I don't think the people are ready to be taxed, right? I don't think that's something they want. And so, yeah, we kind of pulled back from that. I did anyway. I was not interested in having that discussion unless they were about to change the way they fund First Nations. And what I suggested was that, we become, if we were going to be collecting provincial sales taxes on a big business that came into town and was doing business on our land, that I wanted a piece of those taxes in order to pay for the services that were going to service my people, both provincial and federal. And that was a tough discussion for the province to have, right? They weren't interested. And yeah, so, these are things that I was thinking about, down the road, and that's kind of why I pulled away from it. And I see that it's been rejuvenated again, and it would be interesting to see how this one goes through, because I know that now both the province and the feds are saying, let's think about these mandates going forward, and how are those finances going to look to us in the future? And I just said, well, can we do it another way where I'm not abolishing my Aboriginal rights and title, right? So that was a really tough discussion with the treaty part of it, and that's where the treaty is kind of going. A lot of people disagree with it today. It's unpopular. They were also looking at our next door neighbors, the Nisga'a. My people were looking at their Nisga'a friends and were saying, hey, this doesn't work. Look at my friends are getting kicked out of their homes for $250 worth of land taxes. How is that fair? Anyways, those were some issues that were cropping up, and we had to, really think about how are we going to move this forward, because it would work excellently if we had, a lot of businesses coming towards us saying, great, create an industrial park and we'll lease from you, and then, if you got some of those tax revenues back, it would work. But if we're not the tax collectors in our jurisdiction, and we didn't have jurisdiction to tax collect, we would be hamstringed, if you think about it, right? So anyways, those were kind of, that's really in a nutshell. There was a lot more to it than that. But I just thought, okay, I didn't really want to kind of harp on about, treaty because, they're trying to have those discussions today. And they've rejuvenated the discussion. So I'll just leave that at that. But what I'm really interested in is any discussions or any questions from you. And I did get a bunch of questions that came up and forwarded to me. So I don't know, Selena, if you'd be interested in moderating that piece and asking any questions that you feel would be relevant to my discussion today.